listening to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orchestra Teacher Podcast. We are recording today episode number 98 with the one and only Dr. James Mick from Ithaca College in New York. James, you're an amazing educator, researcher, conductor, all-around awesome person, and thank you so much for being here on the Orchestra Teacher Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Charles. It's a very distinguished list of people you've had, so it's fun to be joining. So.
Sorry that it's taken me 98 episodes.
All 98 have been well-deserved.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm just looking forward to chatting. We haven't had a lot of time to chat over the last few years even, so I'm really looking forward to this. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so you're at Ithaca College in New York. Tell us about your journey to get there, and where you're from and what you've done. And I know you've had a whole bunch of great experiences.
Yeah. So I'm originally born and raised in Kansas, and so I had a short stint in St. Louis, Missouri, where I actually started violin. And so I started in Suzuki violin there, and then moved back to Kansas to a town called Newton, which will come around here in just a moment. But actually, we'll jump in there. So when I was in high school, actually in late middle school, I switched over to the double bass. I was just kind of losing interest in music, and it seemed like an instrument that I could play in jazz and do other things. So that's kind of saved me. And in high school, we got a first year orchestra teacher my sophomore year by the name of Rachel Dirks,
wow.
who you've interviewed. So
yes,
she was from my hometown. And my senior year, actually, I'll name drop one other person, but there was a freshman viola player by the name of Blair Williams that was also in that program. And so needless to say, if you don't know these people, they're just incredible and passionate educators. And I felt very fortunate to kind of have that in my background. So
for sure,
I went to Texas Christian University for my undergraduate. I had an aunt and uncle that lived down that way, and that was really kind of my big moment of being in the DFW metropolitan area and visiting programs in Arlington and Plano.
It's a great place to get started. There's a lot of great programs down there. Yeah.
Just to kind of see really kind of some of the most fantastic teaching I've really seen anywhere. And then I came to Ithaca College for my master's degree, which is how I learned about the system, and also where I was teaching a lot of college courses. And so that's kind of where I think my bug originally was set for college. But then I moved back to Texas. I had previously taught for just a short period of time in Arlington elementary and middle school, a couple of maternity leaves, and I moved back to teach in Plano as a middle school teacher.
Great.
And then at that time, I kind of knew that I was maybe wanting to go into higher ed, and I was hearing rumors that Ithaca College might be creating a string music ed job. And so I moved back to New York and taught high school full orchestra, and jazz.
Wow. Okay.
And then talked to the dean, and he was like, yeah, I think we're going to be creating a job, but you should go get a PhD, the best one you can, wherever that was. So I moved to Florida State and at Tallahassee, Florida, to study with Michael Allen. And then the job opened at Ithaca College, and I ended up there since 2011. So I'm in my 14th year here.
Wow. Fantastic.
A true joy. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So did you finish your doctorate before you started the job at Ithaca, or did you finish it after you started the job?
Yeah. So a little bit of a contention there. I was ADD. So
right. Well, a lot of people do that, and
yes.
It's definitely a challenge. I mean, I was that way at Kennesaw too. So it was definitely a challenge to finish and be starting a new job, and as busy as music ed professors are. You can tell us a little bit about that experience.
So my, you're basically, well, if you even back up to the interview process, you're in classes and you're doing all these things and you're just kind of throwing your name in the hat, and it's all extra on top, all the prep. And then you get the job, and then all of a sudden you're trying to write a dissertation and travel. I think I traveled to Tallahassee 5 or 6 different times over the course of my first year. I was teaching a whole number of classes, and it's your first year at a job, and you're just trying to get used to things and get your feet wet. And so,
and make an impression, obviously too, so
trying to,
right.
At least a positive impression.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
Some sort of impression, but yeah. So there was, that was but at the same time, it's how life kind of deals its hand, and life is always changing. And so you just kind of learn to adapt and really boil down to it. And it forced me to learn how to write, in smaller periods of time, which has served me well, given the teaching load that I have, that I don't get a lot of time to.
I know when we were talking, you wear many, many, many hats there. Are you ready to shake up your next orchestra trip? Kaleidoscope Adventures has been planning performance travel beyond expectations for more than 30 years. They know the best destinations and the most iconic venues for orchestras. Check out the Kaleidoscope Adventures link in the show notes below for fresh ideas and inspiration. And then let them do their magic. They'll handle all the details from start to finish, so all you have to do is enjoy the experience.
Well, yeah. So in higher ed, and maybe we'll kind of head this direction. There are many ways of approaching subjects, but typically you kind of have two ways of going. You've got either a research institution, which tends to be you maybe teach a little bit less, but you have to be publishing and you get rated on where you publish and how much you publish and everything else.
Publish or perish. Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And then you also have what they call teaching institutions, which means like we're still publishing and they still want that, but it's not nearly as weighted, but we make up for it in classes and scope of classes that we teach and everything else. So you just have a much heavier teaching load. So you don't have quite chunks of time to write.
Right. And that's kind of what Ithaca is, more of the teaching school. Am I right? Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's how Kennesaw was for me too.
I think we have that very, very much in common. And a lot of us do, again, I don't think there's any contention between the two. It's just kind of, are you at an R1 research institution or are you at a teaching institution? And that kind of tells you what your schedule more or less is.
Well, and for me, I wouldn't have wanted an R1 because I love the pedagogy and I love the teaching part of doing all that. And some people are cut out for it. And some people aren't, and I could do it, but didn't like it. And I wouldn't want that to be the bread and butter of what I do.
Yeah. It's lovely. I love writing and I love research, but it's definitely it's a flavor, but I also love maybe a little bit more, I just love working with students on technique and starting beginners. I teach, all the band and vocal and general music colleagues, here's a violin, here's how you hold it, here's how you get set up, here are the beautiful things and frustrating things about it, but let's jump in. Yeah,
for sure. And that's fun. I enjoyed that. And, they're adults, but they're also, they're realizing, oh, maybe I could do this string thing,
Absolutely.
You never know.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. And so what are the different courses that you teach in Ithaca?
Yeah, so that's changed. So it's always kind of funny, because public school, there's kind of public school and higher education, and sometimes it's fun to kind of enter that conversation. And public school, at least from my time in the public schools and what I see, like you've got to grind. Third period comes every day at the same time, regardless of how you're feeling, what's going on. You've got 45 kids that are in front of you, and you got to be on for that.
Right.
We're higher ed, we have fewer classes and we have more time or more maneuverability. I can schedule around that, but you're gonna pay for it somewhere, right? So I can take a long lunch if I want to, but that just means that instead of that 2-hour writing gap, I'm now going to be writing at 10 o'clock at night, type of a thing. So I could shift things around a little bit more. So my schedule currently in higher ed, we kind of talk semesters. So we'll say like I teach a 2-2, which means you would teach 2 classes in fall and 2 classes in spring, or I teach a 4-3, which again is 4 in the fall. And now I teach a 6-8. So we're also talking to public school teacher here, right? You could also be like, that's all,
Well, no, 6 classes is a lot. I think 6 classes is a lot.
It is, yeah. So, in the fall, I have string techniques, which is you've never played a string instrument, so here's string instruments. And I've got 3 sections of that. Now, we keep the sections pretty small.
Oh, that's good.
That's, your band and choral and elementary general specialists taking that class. So I have 3 sections of that. So technically only 1 prep that I deliver 3 times.
Sure.
Then in the fall, I do 2 sections of an instrumental conducting 1.
Fun.
So that's a second prep. that I get 2 for that. And then I have a string pedagogy, which is the junior year heavyweight.
Nice.
This is how we really dig into rehearsing and the pedagogy behind things.
Great.
And then in the spring, I teach, again, 3 of the string techniques, 2 of instrumental conducting 2. I have a string methods 1, which is for my first year students that are string players that are learning all of their secondary. So if you're a bass player, you're going to be spending your time on violin, viola, cello.
That's great.
Type of a thing. And then string methods 2, I also teach in the spring, and that's just the next level. So we learn kind of grade 1, 2 music, the first year, and then we're getting into 3, 4 music the second year, so that when we get into pedagogy, we have a solid foundation of what it means to play these instruments. And my big thing is that you shouldn't, I think I once learned this from Michael Allen, but I should never look at your orchestra and know what instrument you play, the teacher, right?
Oh,
and
that's kind of challenging, because there's
a very truthful.
It is truthful, but it's
a very truthful thing. And I say that with all kindness, but it was always like a challenge to me, right? Like, can I try to play these instruments like you wouldn't be able to tell, if I'm playing grade 1 or grade 2 music? And so that's really what I work with my students in the string methods courses.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then, you did public school work and higher ed work. What would you say are some of the biggest differences that if teachers were considering, maybe if a public school teacher was considering a higher ed position, what are some things that you would say would be some of the biggest differences from the day-to-day of a public school teacher to the day-to-day of a college professor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talked to a lot of people about this. I think the process, is maybe where a lot of people often have questions. So normally you want to have a doctorate and normally a PhD. So you've got PhDs and then you have a doctorate, of music essentially. And so normally in music ed, you're going to go with a PhD because they are looking for a certain degree. Not always, but that's typically where you're going to go. And normally to enter a program like that, you're going to have to stop your current job, and unless you're already vested, just know that normally this is a major life event. You're going to be moving somewhere across the country. Relationships are going to end or change. If you happen to be in an area where you can go to school, that's you're very fortunate there. Yeah. But know that when you apply for a job, you may again be moving, type of a thing, because there's just not a lot. I think there's a little over 100 full-time string music ed jobs in the country. Was my understanding.
Okay.
And so there's that aspect, right? You got to go to school. You're going to give up your, retirement contributions. You're going to be getting debt again. You're going to be knowing that you're going to likely be taking a pay cut once you get a higher ed job. And so then you're going to apply for a job. And let's say you're fortunate enough to get a tenure track job. There's going to be, dozens of people that are going to be applying for this. And if you get that job, you're going to be moving somewhere again, likely around the country. I think it's very fortunate if you haven't moved yet. And so then again, that's the relationships and everything else. A lot of people are shocked to find that starting salaries, I think, are going to be pretty big pay cuts.
Right.
For a lot of people from the public is maybe you could tell there's a lot of people that were in higher ed that are now teaching, and Atlanta seems to attract a lot of those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a pretty fair pay scale down here, and the difference between our state and a lot of other states is if you go somewhere else and you have 15-year teaching experience, they may only give you 5 or 10 of those years on the pay scale. Whereas here, I mean, I was granted all my years when I went back, and the degree too. So it was a considerable jump from the higher ed to the public school, and people are surprised, like, well, everybody in higher ed, people don't realize, and the problem with the higher ed pay, in my opinion, is the inequity that exists, because in public school, you teach science or you teach math or you teach PE or music or whatever. You have years and you have degrees, and this is what you get paid. But in higher ed, it's College of the Arts is down here, College of Business, College of the science. Like there were people, professors making 4 times what I was making teaching half the load, just because they were in the College of Business.
Yep.
And that's where I feel it's hard to swallow, a little bit. It's like, I'm working really hard, and this is I'm only getting paid this, and the people across the street are doing half the work and making 4 times the salary. So that happens, and that's just a college world. And, and a lot of people are saying, well, they're trying to compete with the industry, and like for the instance in the College of Business, which is true. But, now these colleges are going to realize they got to start competing with the public schools, or people are going to all go back.
Yeah, no, that you're 100% right. And that's one thing that you just kind of have to accept if you want to be in higher ed, and just kind of realize, I mean, another thing is that you're not going to likely have the benefits you get in the public schools, right? So you're going to be teaching probably until you go on to Medicare, because you're not going to have, if you retire earlier, you got to cover your medical costs all the way through.
Yeah, it is different for sure.
Very, very different. So there's a lot of, and you want to have as many years of public school teaching experience before you take the pay cut and take on more debt, but you don't want to go too far, because that gap just widens, or if you have kids, you can't, or if you have a big relationship, that you don't want to. So there's a lot of those things to consider. And then if you do land a tenure track job, you're also now, again, think of how many years you taught public schools, the years that you've now been in school. Now you're teaching, and you're back at the bottom of the pile. You're literally the lowest rung. You're going to teach at the worst times. You're going to have the worst schedule. You're going to have the, no input, and I'm saying this a little bit facetiously, but you've got 6 or 7 years to even know if you're going to potentially have tenure.
Right.
Which means now you're trying to do what you can to get tenure at that school. But if you don't, you also want to have a resume that's good enough for you to apply somewhere else. And so you're not only doing what you need to do at the school, but more than, if that makes sense.
Definitely very challenging, and I still think there are people that are way more cut out. Just, they are the college type. Just like I would say the same thing about an administrator too. Someone who's been teaching and then they want to be a principal. I would never, ever, ever want to be an administrator.
You and I.
You know what I mean? But there are certain people I know that's like, they love it. That's what they do. That's who they are. And that's their wheelhouse as far as organizational skills and liking organizing events and liking taking care of other people's problems, which I would prefer not to do.
I'm right there for you. And I don't mean to paint a negative picture at all. I'm just saying these are some things to think about and some hurdles.
Well, there's a lot of great things too. I mean, I had a lot of freedom to go out and conduct and present. And I had many Fridays where I had 0 classes, and so I could do a little bit of work at home, whatever I needed to do. And I was free to do what I wanted to do. So there's that. And the other thing that people forget is, normally a semester is 15 weeks, so 15 to 15, it's only 30 weeks or so of teaching. And public school, it's usually 36 weeks. So that's another month and a half the public school teachers are working. And so there's definitely perks, and you get in the right place too. I mean, there's some colleges I've heard of, some of the professors go in, they've been teaching public school for a long time, and the university will match their teaching salary,
Wow.
But that's not always, I mean, that's not public school necessarily. Sometimes it's private school, or they'll get close to it, but it really depends on the situation. So, but there's a lot of benefits to it as well. And I did enjoy my time at the university, just seeing the kids go on and get jobs, and that was good. That was a great part. It's very fulfilling.
Exciting.
Very fulfilling.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah. And it's, I never like to do one thing too long. So kind of you pointed out, right? I've got these 15 weeks of teaching classes, and then, I've got 4 weeks over winter break type of a thing. I shift gears. That's when I write, because I can't fit it into my semester. And for me, that's rejuvenating, because now I'm just on this writing schedule and I got this big block of time that I can devote. Or, I conducted a youth orchestra for 8 years up this way. And so I was just able to devote certain times and certain chunks of time to score study and to, these different areas where I wouldn't have that in the public schools, where I've got Monday through Friday starting at, here and ending here, and nothing can move, type of it.
Yeah. It's a lot more rigid,
Yeah.
And if you're getting asked to do outside things like guest conduct or do clinics or presentations, and just, you are limited. I feel a little bit limited in how much I can take off. And, my home family kids are first, and my school kids are second, and then everything else is third. So there's, prioritizing that,
It's still amazing how much you do and how much you continue to contribute, to our field and the number of conferences you still make too. I mean, I'm struggling to make as many, I think, as you are. So
well, it's nice. I mean, I have a very supportive admin, supportive district. We have a supervisor of music who gets it. He's done a lot of things too, and I do take personal days when I'm getting paid, and so there are very few of those. So that's why I'm kind of limited. It's like, people want me to come and do a presentation. It's like, how about Saturday? Come on Saturday. But it's hard when they say, oh, we need you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Or it's like, I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So that's what retirement will be for, I guess. Right. But as a college professor, it is hard to cancel classes, but they were always really supportive of me doing it. And, I'd have some of my colleagues would cover for me. And it was nice. That was a nice part.
Yeah. If you can plan ahead, you can work your schedule. There's ways that you can kind of write a syllabus. Like today is going to be a work day because you got a big exam on the Monday, I mean, you
work it in.
There's some tricks of the trade that you've got there, some universities will limit you. You can't miss more than 2 of one class, sure. Type of a thing. And so you can't miss the first class and last,
right.
But they also, as part of your higher ed job, when you get hired, is you're going to be given a number, and they're going to tell you 50, 25, 25. And in higher ed lingo, that is 50% of my job is teaching.
Yes.
25% is going to be professional activity, whether that is research or that is conducting, however your school defines that. Mm-hmm. And then 25% is going to be your service. And in higher ed, you need to have service to the college, you need to have service to the community, and you need to have service, to the profession, both at the national and international level. And so you're trying to build a resume around all these things, and they will tell you what it is. So if you're 100-0-0, then your only thing you need to worry about is teaching. Or if you're 25-50, 25, then research, it just tells you right there that research is a big part of your job. Yeah. And so, so you can kind of, depending on where that wedge is, you can kind of know how much can I be missing class for a conference, for conducting, or for writing, type of a thing.
Yeah. And in my situation, they were very flexible. So it was, you're presenting, okay, great. You're conducting, okay, great. You're doing school clinics, great. It was pretty much anything goes. And the schools do evolve too. So I don't know how much it's changed since I left, because that was 2016 already. But that's schools do change too, and so they'll go from that teaching university to the R1. They'll make that transition, and then those expectations change too for the professors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some of the things? What are some of the things you're working on, or have you done some research recently that you'd be interested in just commenting about, or something or other research that just interested you recently?
Yeah. Why don't I go? My big thing, I love just interacting with children and teachers as much as possible. I mean, that's kind of my biggest passion. And so my favorite thing is taking, conducting gigs, and then also in everything from just being at a school. I mean, actually, that's kind of what I prefer most, is being in a school. So I'm working with all students, type of a thing, all the way through, those special honor ensembles too, which are equally fun. And so I love being able to peek into places all around the country. And that's really kind of a cool thing, is that, when you get these invitations, sometimes you can kind of work your schedule like, oh, I've never been to, Washington State, type of a thing. And I'd love to see. And so you get to go visit teachers, you get to learn about the programs, you get to learn about what they do, how the state is set up. And then that for me in turn, allows me to kind of adapt what I'm doing with my own students and with my own schedule. You can kind of see what are the method books, that people are talking about right now. What is the big thing, and there's just a lot of filtration that you get, where I think a lot of times in the public schools, because yes, we have some of these organizations, but the day-to-day grind of being in your own place with the same people kind of around you is a lovely thing, but it's also, you're looking to get some of those things where I feel like that's one of my things that I love, is being able to gather that and then bring that back, coalesce it, and kind of work through students with that, and share with other teachers too.
Yeah.
And so as far as research, though, that I've done recently, Michael Alexander and Brett Smith and I just did a follow-up. So we did a status on public school orchestras and teachers in the country. We did that. I guess we published that 5 or 6 years ago. And so we've done a follow-up since COVID. So we've collected a little bit more data on that. We just had a poster at the National ASA conference on that. And so I think we're getting into gear on writing that into an article. And that's just been
what are you looking at in that study?
Yeah, so we had some general questions. So this is a line of research that Don Hammond had called for a number of years ago, saying we should be doing every 5 years, every 5 to 7 years, 10 years. We should just be collecting data. So
what
we know
the status of orchestras in the schools are?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
Our number is growing. Do we have a shortage of teachers? Do we have, type of a thing? And so we asked those questions. How many students do you have? What does your retention rate look like? How big is your district? How many string teachers do you have in the district? Do you anticipate openings? Has your funding increased or decreased? Type of a thing. And so we kind of collect all that information, and it's a lot. And we sort through and kind of look for trends and kind of see where we're sitting. And so we wanted to collect one, particularly following, the pandemic, and kind of compare from our previous article that was before, and then articles that were before that, to see where we were at. And it's been really kind of fascinating, some of the results. I mean, a lot of things have remained consistent, right? So we have seen that as far as some nitty-gritty numbers type of a thing, those have remained the same, which is really kind of interesting.
Number of teachers.
Like
I know you probably can't say a whole
retention rates.
You can't say everything, right? Because
just kind of the whole thing. Where we saw some differences is, first off, when we saw differences, they tended to be more polarized. So we got more of a bottom end and more of a top end type of a thing versus kind of scrunched in the middle. So things just kind of spread a little bit. But overall, when we even saw a dip in something, it was not a massive dip. It was actually, most programs were going opposite way. So where we saw programs that were losing funding, that number was higher than we've seen in the past, or it's decreased. But we're still seeing the majority of programs either stayed the same or increased.
Okay.
And so there's a silver lining that's there. Is like, oh my gosh, like instead of 15% of programs losing funding, we had 30%. That's a massive difference
that's a big
that we've seen projected.
Yeah.
However, 70% of programs remain the same or actually even increase during this time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how you look at some of that. So we saw that. We saw that student numbers, again, it looked like more students dropped, but average numbers, it came down slightly because I think we saw some of that, but overall it either maintained or is growing.
Cool.
Again. So those are a couple of the, I think, really fascinating. We're a more diverse, I think, field, at least amongst our students than we often, I think, sometimes assume. In other words, when we look at the census data from 2020, our student populations are pretty similar to that as far as breakdown. And so that's really, I think, kind of an encouraging area for us. I think we have more room to grow within our teaching, obviously, field. But those are probably a couple of the highlights. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And any other, trends or things you're seeing? I mean, you're, if I remember correctly, you're pretty technology forward. Am I right?
I try to be.
Yeah. Have you, seen anything, or, I mean, being in higher ed too, with AI and all that, there's some debate with it. But also there's a lot of people that are using it for the good. Have you seen any trends with technology or anything like that?
It's only anecdotal at this point.
Okay,
I don't think I wouldn't say I've seen a trend yet. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where the impacts of ChatGPT and OpenAI and everything else is in a music setting, right?
Yeah.
We have the Essential Elements, we have a lot of wonderful kind of programs that are working online that are getting better and smarter and better able to kind of grade and do that type of thing. So I think that those applications have been around for quite a while. They're just a lot better now. And so that's,
it's amazing. I remember like when, smart music first came out, it was like, okay, you could easily cheat this and figure out that it's, red note, green note. But the new AI grading that's in Muse class or other software like that, it's it really is starting to be able to be a little bit more judgmental,
Mhm.
and also just even determine like that the amount that you're out of tune, or the amount that you're off rhythm, and then give you some really good numbers back, for
Yes.
the students to, or whoever's using it, but to that feedback has really gotten so much better.
I think I agree, and I'm real excited to check out more of that. I think that where maybe I always love talking to my own students about this, but in string playing, I don't think there's any way to cheat the nuance and the muscle control and everything of playing a string instrument, which
No.
is the frustration and the beauty of string instruments. For 500 years,
Well-
you've had to put the same amount of time in to get the flexibility and everything going on. Now, these programs can help and give us different information, and help us kind of guide us. But at the same time, you still have to sit down and practice and play and work and relax and think about all of these neuromuscular and everything else that we go through as string players. And so I think it's exciting, and I think it's interesting to know where things are going to go, but I don't think it doesn't really impact massively how a student achieves if they're not practicing at the end of the day, type of a thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, AI does so many great things, but then you put in to generate a violin, and it can't do it. Like, if you ever looked at an AI generated instrument, I found like the strings are all messed up. It can't get the pegs right. Like it just looks terrible. So I still think there's a lot of work that it needs to do, but. Yeah, AI like string instruments just look awful. If you ever done an image generation before, holy cow, it's really bad, really bad.
They have random things like 5-string basses and
the strings don't even line up, or it'll start with 5 and then it'll like blend into 4, or it's just, they're terrible. So it's so funny, Yeah.
How about you? What are you seeing? I mean, I feel like I should flip the script here, because you are kind of the technology
Whose podcast
person.
is this? No, I'm kidding. I'm seeing that in some instances it can be very handy, but I'm also worried that students are going to be using it and submitting work as their own when it's not. And I know there's fact checker type things too, to determine whether it's AI written or not. But I'm also concerned that students, there are kids who are like, oh, I know how to get around that. Like, they've already told me. I was like, so it's, the integrity. I just worry about that, and even a lot of the standardized tests, it's all done on the computer. It's typed out, but I just don't know. I hope that it will still have that integrity to be able to have people be honest with the work that they submit and the work that gets done, and I hope it doesn't genericize, if that's a word, written word. I just worry about that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess that kind of the age old, right? Practice cards. How many minutes did you practice? And you need to be here. And are we just
all lies.
teaching them to lie, or
100%,
yeah,
100%. So I hope that there'll be some really good ways to just determine whether it's not. But you look at some videos that are made with AI, and they're just looking more and more and more real. And some of them you can obviously tell there's some weird things go on, but at the same time, we're just getting started with this.
Yeah,
really. And the computers are getting more powerful, and the algorithms are getting better and better and better. And then there's that little thing about there was like 2 computers talking to each other, and then they switched language. I was watching this thing, and they switched languages that we can't understand, but they can, and it makes them able to communicate way, way faster than using our language. It's a little scary. I don't know if you've seen that or heard about that.
I have not seen that.
It's some language that they use. It reminds you. It just brings back Terminator vibes. The war against the machines. So I don't know. I hope, but I do know this, that I don't think AI will ever be able to recreate authentically what we do as humans. There's always going to be. They might get good at it, but they're never going to get to the point, I think, where the type of music that we can make and the type of things that we can do on our own, in reaching the beauty that we can provide, they're just not gonna. It's gonna take a long time before that happens. Hopefully, it'll be after my lifetime. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you. I think that's the special thing about what all of your listeners, your audience, and what we do is education. And a core of my philosophy is that we're educators first. Now, secondly, we happen to have this beautiful thing called music that we get to teach. But if we can't open those doors with students, it doesn't matter what we're trying to deliver for them. And so for me, I don't know if that can be replaced. I mean, that is such a tough thing to have in the first place.
Yes.
But when you have it, and we all have it, the other beauty of it is that we all reach students in different ways. And that's the beauty of having the diversity of teachers, is that you're going to reach students in ways that I can't,
Yes.
and in different ways. And I don't think that at any time, you can't be all things to all students at all times. You can be, great things to many students, maybe many of the times, but not always. And I don't think that AI will ever be able to be that all things, or maybe it can help a little bit in some areas where you struggle to help you maybe broaden your reach. And I hope that that's maybe where things are going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does make some things easier. For instance, like for the podcast, I'll have it write a podcast episode description, chat GPT, and I'll, copy and paste the guest's bio in there, and it comes up with a really well-written little, mini paragraph that I can use. And some things, obviously I'm editing that too, because, if I paste your bio in there and I'm just looking at it real fast, like, okay, your research interest include adjudication, reliability. We didn't talk about that, but it might throw it in there.
I didn't want people to stop watching or listening to this.
No, that's a cool thing. And just now that I've opened that can of worms, what are some of the things that you found with adjudicator reliability? Because I feel that, and maybe I'm just getting old, but I feel like there's a lot of people getting ones and not a lot of people getting twos anymore. And I hope my students aren't listening to this, but I was kind of hoping that at least one of my groups would get a 2 this year, because some of them wait till the last minute to work on things, and they give me more gray hairs and all that. And I just didn't feel like that was their best work. Like, they could have done more, and they ended up getting superiors. And it's one of those things, like, I'm trying to raise the bar, and every time we go to LGPE, they're getting superiors, and I'm working hard. And, but I just think that we're not at the level where we could be and where I would like us to be. And, and I can't without strictly like writing on the score, please give them 2s. What are some of the things that you've seen? I don't know if maybe it's just me and getting old, and I never ever want to get a rating because I'm at a certain school, or I'm who I am, or whatever it is. I never ever want that. I want the truth, and it's part of the reason I don't judge that much, because I know that sometimes it's hard for people to like really be honest, especially if they're great. You're judging your peers, but it's for the kids, and for me, it's I want them to get better, and I want them to see, this isn't really superior. This is excellent, but it's not superior. So I don't know. What do you think? Those are my 2 cents on.
No. I love it. And I love the humanizing nature that you bring to it. And you bring up a lot of the complexities and the confounding variables that are involved with this. So first off, this is a research thread that David Pope and myself have done a number of articles on. We
just had David on here. So
yes. Yeah. Just another phenomenal person, and someone who I met at Florida State. We were co-teachers. So we started at Florida State during Michael Allen's last year there.
I love all the Florida State people, but you guys are almost like a mini cult. I'm joking, but it's you look at all the teachers down there, the professors, and all the people who have come out of that university. It's like, holy cow! I mean, it's a giant school, but holy cow, there's just the greats. All the greats have come out of there.
Oh, well, there are so many people that I look up to that have come there, but also so many other places. I mean, you are a product of some great institutions, and as are so many people, but thank you. I mean, that was really, I was looking at a number of different schools when I was applying, and I thought, I'm just going to pick the top 5 or 6, send an email so I know where I really need to apply next year, type of a thing. And I got a response from all of them, and it just kind of shocked me. And the way life worked out, I ended up at Florida State, with Michael Allen, but also, there were other folks that were there that really kind of led me that way. So David and I met at that time, and we became, I think, fairly close pretty quickly. Michael Allen passed away at the end of our first year there, and so David and I, then his second year, we taught some of his, taught basically his course load, and then David stayed for his third year, and they hired David Sogan, who also came in during that time. And I started at Ithaca College. But David and I were interested in, sorry, not to pivot too quickly here, but to get back to the ratings and reliability.
No, I got off of the topic a little bit.
No, this is good. And so we basically have done some surveys. We've collected scores. We've looked at things. I think it's hard to compare pre and post because we weren't a pre and post. What were things 20 years ago and what are things now?
Right.
But typically what we see are that, most ensembles are going to get a 1 or 2. I mean, and we're talking we haven't done all states, but in places we've looked, generally in the mid 90s are going to be a 1 or a 2, right? So that's usually a superior and an excellent. Then you're going to see some goods, which are usually a 3 at most states, or a bronze, depending on how you do it.
Which really doesn't mean good.
Well, it depends. I mean, I think there are some places, and then, there's maybe a lesser smattering of under that. I think that one of the things we were looking at was reliability between adjudicators. And one of the things that we saw, at least anecdotally, that a lot of people are frustrated with, or is if they get like what we call a rainbow, like 1, 2, 3, or if you get 2 2s and a 1, and David and I kind of theorize in one of our articles, and I've done some adjudication too, is that actually because there are so many 1s and 2s, the 1 1 2 type of a situation, or the 2 2 1, or the however you want to split that, those are shades, because instead of using all 5, since we're only using 2, we need to create 5 shades within that. So now some, I think, panels kind of work that way. You're like, well, I don't think all 3 should be 1s, but they still deserve superior. So let's do a 1 1 2. You're type of a thing.
Right.
And so That's
a good point. Yeah, we're not using the full spectrum.
Exactly. So we create a mini spectrum, right? That is within a more acceptable norm for today's time, type of a thing. And so who knows if that's the truth or not? I've done that on panels that I've been in before where we're kind of that way. And I found that it seems like that might be something that is done that maybe isn't necessarily discussed or known. So I think some teachers shouldn't ever feel threatened if they get 2 2s and a 1, or even a 1 2 3 sometimes, type of a situation. But I also think it's good to keep in mind that hopefully it's the comments, it's the experience. Hopefully this isn't the only thing we do all year. It is one piece that might motivate some kids, but not all kids for all situations. And to kind of keep that in perspective. And I think it's difficult if we have a district that circles that and says that rating then is a value of you as a teacher.
Yeah, that's right. No,
maybe it's a small little piece, but I think that those are more kind of the tougher situations.
Well, I've heard, certain states are real tough with it. And it's like, you get a 2, you're fired. It's like, geez, you never know. But, I think it's a lot about programming, and making sure you're picking the right rep for your kids, and obviously the preparation that you put together. But, it's a way
to do it. Yeah.
It's interesting. And some people play the game. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go with real easy music, so we can just. And there's nothing wrong with playing really easy music, because if you're gonna play that, then you're gonna play it musically. You got to play everything on it. It's like playing, the Midwest groups, the high school Midwest groups that have to play the grade 1 piece. When we did that, I was like, y'all, do not take this for granted. This is a real piece of music. There's a composer that wrote it, and we're gonna play it the best we can. We're gonna make amazing music out of this grade 1.
Yes,
it's important.
And how many of us have sat in those audience and have been like, wow, I wish my orchestra, wait, that's a grade 2,
right.
Oh my gosh.
And you give it to the 7th grade orchestra or the 8th grade. It's going to sound a little different, but
some slight variation, you got to move some things around.
Yeah. But it's important, I think, that regardless of what you do, you're trying to make music and go beyond just scratching the surface.
Exactly. And I think that, programming, since we're kind of alluding to that, is, I think many of us, in the field and many teachers, agree that is our curriculum, although we shouldn't be just teaching because we need to go in a second position for this piece, that
right.
The piece realizes second position because we're working, type of a thing. But that, we have a challenge piece where, notes and rhythms, where we struggle sight reading through it, but we're not doing all challenge pieces all the time. Maybe we have the grade 2 for whatever that means for your group, if that's an easier side, easier notes and rhythms.
Right.
But now can we phrase and can we make, that's where we're starting with it. Yeah, I can expect you to be able to sight. If you can't sight read this, right? We need to talk, type of a thing.
That's it.
But can you make music? Can you phrase? Can you breathe together? Can you move together? Can we get entrances that are, all of those other things? And hopefully we're programming all of that throughout however we define our period of time. Now, I would say at festival, maybe you don't want to do all stretch pieces, that might be an area where you might want to find something where you can put a little bit more time into your phrasing and some of those other areas, at least demonstrate it. But there is a place for the stretch pieces. Yeah.
And just balancing too, there's, I've seen groups like, okay, you're playing 3 pieces. They're all fast in an E minor, that's a little problematic in my book. So, we want to make sure that we're diversifying our keys or tempi, styles, those kind of things.
When I I conducted the Rochester Philharmonic Youth Orchestra for 8 years.
Yeah, you did for a while.
Previously mentioned, And I had, the very first thing I did was create a list. And I knew that on average, let's just say I had a student for 4 years, I want to hit these works, so that
you got the
core.
core.
Student's in there in 4 years, they've played a Tchaikovsky symphony, they have done pictures and an exhibit, whatever those repertoire pieces were. And I had that list, and that was something that I wanted to come back, and I was able to kind of cycle through some of those things. And then around that, I was complimenting, given the students that were in front of me. I wasn't programming for the ensemble I wanted to have. I was programming, if I didn't have the bassoon players, we're not going to do X, type of.
Yeah.
I also wanted to increase, other things here and there. And so programming really, I think, is hopefully, something that we all agree on, that it's so important to spend so much time and to plan around that so that we're not caught off guard, but yet we're always making music and we're always pushing ourselves and our students.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we've kind of gone to different all over.
I love it.
But like I said, you're a versatile guy with all the different things you've done, and between bass and conducting and music ed and the research and your teaching, and it's great. And it's just been nice to catch up with you.
I really appreciate that, Charles, and thank you for all you do and all that you contribute. And I was telling you before we started the episode, but I listened to all your episodes, and I have my students, it's on syllabus for their choice reflections, because just being able to know who's out there, and it just really personifies people and topics, all these areas that you broach, and just want to thank you for all that you do for our field.
Like I said, I love it, and love just catching up with friends, meeting new people, and selfishly, every time I do one of these, I get something out of it too. So it's my continuous PD that I do, and it's been a lot of fun.
I love it.
Well, everybody, this is episode, what did I say, 98? Wow. Really looking forward to getting to that milestone 100 episode here pretty soon. But James, it's been a pleasure. Just really enjoyed having you on. And again, if I will put your contact info down in the notes if you're interested in a wonderful guest conductor or presenter or clinician, whatever you need. James is the person to call. So, but thank you again for being here.
Very much appreciate it, Charles. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you all later. Thank you for tuning in. For resources and more information, visit orchestrateacher.net.